Well, this week I'm going to call this roller coaster because from a world event, prophetic things happening or things that seem to fit within what we expect to happen in the end times in Bible prophecy, this has been one of the more intense weeks that I've ever experienced. I spent some time on the phone yesterday with my good friend Bill Koenig, and the first 5 minutes we just said, wow, yeah, wow, I mean, really, wow, can you believe, wow, yeah, can you believe that, wow. And that was pretty much our conversation for a while, because to the people who are paying attention, and pray for Bill. He was at the press briefing the other day, and just pray for his protection, because there is a evil spirit behind a lot of the things that are going on in the world right now. And Christians need to be praying for other Christians and standing with other Christians. I myself, I had to go to California this week for some things. I traveled out there to show you that I'm not always discerning. I actually flew to LAX because I thought it would save me a few $100s, which it did, but in hindsight, it wasn't worth it. I wrote about it a little bit on my Facebook page. I was kind of posting, could we turn off the main lights in the room? And I posted some things about, for example, one of my comments was, anybody who believes that we're going to build the kingdom of God on earth has never flown through LAX. It's just not possible. Why would you put an 6.5-foot wide pillar in the middle, a series of 6.5-foot wide pillars in the middle of an 8-foot wide sidewalk where you have to go with luggage, with traffic going down both sides of the curb? Why would you do that? The bus driver explained to me, he was a very jovial guy. It took me 1 hour and 51 minutes from the time my plane pulled up at the gate until I had my rental car and was driving away. It took almost as long as it did to fly from Dallas to LA. Maybe a little bit longer, now that I think about it. It was a nightmare. It was hot. It was crowded. Everybody in the world was there, it seemed like. I had to wait for my luggage, had to wait for the rental car bus. And the bus driver was very jovial, though. I think he either is blessed with just a wonderful spirit or he's stoned. I don't know what. There's only two alternatives there. And one of the things he said, well, we're remodeling the airport. And I'm like, what are the pillars for? He goes, oh, well, that was an earthquake retrofit. To which I said, if God wants to knock this thing down, why don't you let him and start over? Because it would be better. Why fight it? So it was an interesting week. And it was one of these weeks where we really see all of these different signs converging. As I distilled down today what I want to talk about, I'm going to kind of jump around, because when we look at the world culture, the world geopolitics, Israel, the Middle East, everything's really in play. Everything is coming together. And I have some suggestions to you, and I'm not date setting or anything of that kind, but I want you to be aware, as Pastor Stephen at the beginning said, we need to be prepared for the things that are coming on the earth. God gave us a fairly detailed roadmap so that these things would not overtake us, would not give us a spirit of fear, and we can stand up to it. And we should expect that America is going to go down. It's going to go down. Exchanged with some people this week, and I know they love America, they love where they grew up. They said it's judgment time. It's here, and I don't know that it can be avoided. In fact, to the extent some of us talked, and it was like, I don't know that I'd waste my money contributing to political campaigns for the next presidential election. Frankly, I don't think, there's a couple good people out there, I guess, but I see things I'm disturbed about. Our own governor has said, well, if we let these Syrian refugees in, That'll help us understand. And no, it doesn't make any sense, Governor. It's not right. Wake up and get a clue. Look at what's going on, and we'll talk about that today. So just some example of some of those things. We know that culture will become as the days of Lot. And here is this article in Time magazine this week. Is monogamy over? So this whole thing about same-sex marriage is not about same-sex marriage. This is about ripping apart God's design for humanity, who he made them male and female. That is the agenda behind this. It is a satanic, demonic agenda to rip apart humanity on this basis. I don't know how else to say it. And in light of that, these things, for example, this is some things going on in California. You can pray for some of our friends out there that are facing these fires that are going on. Here's a little report about that.
There are new mandatory evacuation orders tonight as an explosive wildfire rages out of control in central California. Homes in danger of being consumed by flames as the fire also threatens to spread through an ancient grove of giant sequoia trees in Kings Canyon National Park. NBC's Gotti Schwartz has the latest.
In fire-ravaged California, there is a new inferno growing called the Butte Fire. Flames so intense, so large, spreading so fast.
Get that right there.
Even a TV crew from NBC's Sacramento station KCRA was caught inside the blaze. Nearby, the heat is churning out swirling firenadoes, homes fully engulfed. Explosions heard within.
The fire's picking up, and it's pushing up against the few containment lines we have so far.
More evacuations are underway, and families are ready to get out.
I'll just get the personal things that I need to take, and God willing, it subsides.
There is a lot of...
The fire has grown to 50,000 acres in just 3 days. While near Fresno, the Rough Fire, California's largest fire, is now more than 119,000 acres. It's forced the evacuation of an exotic cat refuge, lions, tigers, and jaguars loaded into crates.
It's best to move the animals out at this point.
The Rough Fire is also now expanding towards the ancient sequoia forests, where we climbed last week with scientists studying the effects of drought.
One of the most remarkable things about the view up here, you get an overview of the forest, and unfortunately, a lot of the trees that we see out there are dying because of the droughts.
Sprinklers are now being set up to protect the resilient redwoods, but in some areas, up to 1 in 4 smaller trees have died, leaving dangerous levels of fuel, conditions where a tiny spark can quickly explode into unstoppable flames during a historic fire season that has only just begun. Gotti Schwartz, NBC News, Los Angeles.
It's very dry in Southern California, where I was also, but their fire season doesn't start for another few weeks because they have it was 106 on Tuesday when I was there, and relatively humid, about 35% humidity, which it was hot, and it was very oppressive. So pray for the people in California. Some of these flames, they're shooting up 200 feet in the air. It's a very unique situation. It's something that they really... at least in the lifetimes of everybody that's alive, they've never seen this type of thing going on. And there's already been multiple fires. Washington's been on fire for quite a bit, Oregon, even up into British Columbia. So is it God's judgment? At this point, I'm not excluding any possibility along those lines because our country has really acted the wrong way. This lady... went to an Office Depot in the Chicago suburb the other day, and what she did was she wanted to copy a flyer. And on the flyer were quick facts about Planned Parenthood, factual information about Planned Parenthood, and also a prayer for Planned Parenthood. You can find it online. It was done by some bishop, that Planned Parenthood would repent and respect life and not continuing to do what they do, to make commerce of body parts of aborted babies. Office Depot, she sent it in online, and she got a call and said, you need to come down and talk to the manager. She went down, she talked to the manager. He said, we can't print this. It's company policy. Office Depot was quoted in the Chicago Tribune and said that their Office Depot company policy prohibits the copying of any type of material that advocates any form of racial or religious discrimination or the persecution of certain groups of people. It also prohibits copying any type of copyrighted material. The flyer contained material that advocates the persecution of people who support abortion rights. Praying for their repentance is persecution. And then here's a little video. She was interviewed by Tucker Carlson on Fox.
Office Depot facing a potential lawsuit after refusing to let a woman copy flyers that criticized Planned Parenthood. Maria Goldstein wanted to print those flyers, but the store in Illinois refused to do so, saying her papers persecuted people who believe in legalized abortion. Well, Maria Goldstein and her attorney, Thomas Ulp, join us now. Thanks so much for joining us, both of you. So, Maria, give us a quick recap of what happened. You go into Office Depot hoping to have copies made. What did they say to you?
Actually, I ordered online in the morning, and I received a call in the afternoon saying that they need to talk to me about my order. And when I called the office, or the Schaumburg Office Depot, they said that my flyer could not be printed because the content was restricted by corporate policy. And when I asked what that corporate policy was, they couldn't tell me. And then it kind of got passed down the line, so I finally ended up calling corporate. They did not return any of my phone calls, and that's when I contacted Thomas More Society.
So I just want to be totally clear for our viewers who haven't read the flyer you were attempting to copy. You were not advocating violence against anybody?
No, and that's one, I'd like to clear up two misconceptions. One is that this was persecution and hate speech. There was a prayer on that flyer, and prayer is always for someone, for the benefit of someone, never against. And it was strongly worded, I'll admit that, but you know, in light of the undercover Planned Parenthood videos, where in one of them you see a technician discussing how there was an aborted baby on the tray and she saw the heart beating and still cut through the face to harvest the brain, I think strong words are called for in a prayer for the conversion.
So, Thomas, I want to put up on our screen something you've read, of course. This is the response from the company, and I'm quoting, "The copying of any material that advocates any form of racial or religious discrimination or the persecution of certain groups of people is, according to Home Depot, prohibited by their internal policy." So is their position that opposing Planned Parenthood is a form of persecution and discrimination?
That's exactly what they said. They called it hate speech. So they basically said a prayer which called for the conversion of Planned Parenthood and the enlightenment of people in the abortion industry was hate speech, and they also called it graphic material that violated their policy.
Now, Maria, you'll notice that when the CEO of a fast food chicken outlet said that he was uncomfortable with changes to marriage, a massive boycott was organized against his company. Do you think Christians will take note of this, that Office Depot is saying that anybody who opposes Planned Parenthood's sale of baby parts is a bigot?
Christians have taken note of this. And I mean, it's been all over the media, and that's the second misconception I'd like to clear up, is that in some of the media, they're calling me anti-abortion, and that is not what I am. I am not anti-abortion. I'm pro-woman. I sidewalk counsel weekly outside of an abortion clinic, and I'm actually there when the women leave after their abortions, and I see so much pain and so much just devastation that's what I'm trying to prevent. I am pro-woman. I want to save people from that pain. And I'm very friendly with the clinic employees, too. I'm not against them either. I reach out to them. I tell them we're praying for them. It's always with love.
Okay. Well, there's that. Now, there's this. And I am going to jump around today. And the United Nations. They start meeting this week in New York. That's what has some of the things Pastor Steve talked about. The Pope will be here to speak. Mahmoud Abbas will be here to speak. I don't know if Benjamin Netanyahu will be speaking this year. But at the opening of the sessions, they generally have the heads of state of various countries from around the world come and give a speech on generally topics of their choosing. I expect President Obama will be there as well, speaking on different issues. But one of the things that they're going to come is they're having actually a summit, and I think the Pope's speech is coinciding with the beginning of this Summit, the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit 2015, what they're trying to do is they're putting in what they call Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It says this: the agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace in larger freedoms. In larger freedom. We recognize that eradicating poverty in all forms and its dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Essentially what this is a blueprint for the United Nations, the World Organization, to control everything. And because America is really on the downward path, I suspect America will fall right in line this time, because this is exactly what the president and his cohorts support politically. And you can go and download these things, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and you can read the pages. Listen to what some of their goals are. We are determined to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality, and in a healthy environment. Boy, is that a leftist solution for controlling everything? Planet. We are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. And all the people that will support there will get on their private jets and they will fly to New York to talk about how everybody else is killing the planet with their carbon usage. Al Gore may be there if he can free up his private jet for the weekend, I guess. Prosperity. And I don't want to overplay this issue, but I don't want to underplay this issue or this what they're doing. This is New World Order stuff writ large. They don't hide it anymore. It's right out there in the public. This is the agenda of everybody on the planet, and it will be heightened because everything is melting down. Because, they think they're going to build a utopia. Scripture tells us something different, that there will be someone who will come to lead this up, who will take control with his cohort, the false prophet, and he will try to implement all of these things. So the agenda of that evil person is now on the internet. Downloadable in PDF format, and you can print it off. And I suspect you can print this one at Office Depot. Prosperity. We are determined to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, and that economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. Peace. What is it that they say about peace and safety? We are determined to foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. How's that going, by the way? There can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. There is a man coming who will speak massive lies to humanity, will deceive and mislead many, that he has all of the answers. At some point, we know he will be directly possessed by Satan. The stage, my friends, is set. Newsweek magazine this week, the cover is the Pope Catholic? Now, as I was growing up, is the Pope Catholic was the answer to some questions, like, and I know this will be painful for Cleveland Indian fans because you don't have anything like this, but is Roberto Clemente the greatest right fielder of all time in baseball? Okay. Or is the Pope Catholic is the answer to that question? Of course, it's obvious, yes. Is the Immaculate Reception the greatest football play ever in the history of football? Is the Pope Catholic? That's what we would say in Pittsburgh, around Pittsburgh where I grew up. But so I would suggest that maybe the question should not be, is the Pope Catholic, but is the Pope the false prophet? And I will say this, as I've observed this and watched this for over 20 years now, intently, I've never seen a better candidate in our day and age. I've never seen it. I mean, this man, and the reason why people are asking the question is the Pope Catholic, because he's more of a leftist than a Catholic. He comes out of the Marxist liberation theology of South America. By the way, this is the first time he's ever been to America. All the other popes came to America, at least in recent history, before they were elected pope. But this one's avoided America. But now it's safe for him to come and put out his agenda. And it is a leftist agenda in line with the goals that I just read from you from the 2030 goals for sustainable development. It's all these little pieces that Bible prophecy people have talked about for years, for decades, in sort of an academic fashion, I'll admit, now can be talked about by reading the newspaper. And I know there's the accusation, oh, it's just newspaper exegesis. Okay, look, the scriptures are all there that tells exactly what's going to happen in the end times, and we review those. And I don't go into all of them every Sunday, but go read Daniel, go read Revelation, and tell me that this does not fit within what those markers are for the end times. And I'm not the only one that's saying this. I have many, many friends who devote their lives to watching this, and every single one of them is saying the same thing. We've never seen anything like this. Is it the end? It sure looks like it to a lot of us. Could we be wrong? Yeah, I suppose. But I don't know if I'd want to see it get worse. There are strange things happening this week in the Middle East. There are reports, you can go to watch.org, Bill Koenig's website, and see some of the meteorological reports about this dust storm that's descending from Syria to the south and covering the Middle East. Lebanon, people are sick. Over a dozen people have died. This is the Temple Mount the other day. People can't breathe. They're walking around in masks. And it's gone on much longer than anything anybody's ever seen. And the meteorologists, they're like, I don't know what's happening. We can't explain it. That's what they're saying. I'm not making it up. I'm just telling you what the facts are. You can draw your own conclusions. At the same time, this is going on, this home of a vile, wicked religion. This is the Grand Mosque, Great Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. In the center of that white octagon, I guess it's an octagon, pentagon, or anyway, in the middle of that thingy there is the Kaaba, of course, the most sacred, the focal point. It's where they now turn and bow and pray towards Mecca. When they first did it, they really were praying towards Petra, but that's subject for another talk. And there next to the Kaaba is what is either the second or third largest, tallest building on planet Earth, the Mecca Royal Clock Tower, the largest clock in the world. And of course, they're expanding the Great Mosque because Islam is growing, and they want to accommodate more worshipers. In fact, these are some of the plans that they have for these are older plans, but they're actually implementing these. This is where the clock tower is. Of course, it's much, much taller. These buildings back here, 35, 40, 80 stories tall, which will be hotels and residences for people that want to live there. And they've expanded the plaza so they can accommodate more worshipers. And the plans are ultimately that the Great Mosque will be able to accommodate 3 to 5 million, based on the reports that I've read, 3 to 5 million people at one time. The construction is being done. Now, of course, we know this week there was a crane blowover. Over 100 people, maybe up to 200 people were crushed to death. The pictures are pretty awful. Here's just a little report from NBC about this. It was a freak wind and rainstorm that happened on 9/11. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, okay? I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
There's been a terrible accident at one of the most holy sites in the world, a deadly crane collapse in Saudi Arabia at Mecca's Grand Mosque, with more than 100 people killed, many more injured. Images from the scene are still coming in tonight. We get late details from NBC's Keir Simmons.
The terrifying moment caught on cell phone video. A towering construction crane collapses, then panic and calls for God's mercy. It came down on top of one of the most holy places in the Muslim world, Mecca's Grand Mosque, smashing through the ceiling just before evening prayer, causing carnage too gruesome to show in full. At least 107 people were killed, more than 200 injured, Saudi authorities say. Men in bloodied robes, stunned simply to have survived. The mosque is surrounded by giant construction cranes. A powerful storm apparently caused the collapse. Mecca had been hit by high winds and heavy rain. A view from above shows the base of the huge crane toppled. Emergency workers flooding the area, carrying away the dead. They died on a holy day in a holy place, one believer said on Twitter. A martyr's death, said another. Mecca is just days away from a huge influx of visitors, the Hajj pilgrimage, one of the largest religious gatherings in the world. Last year, 2 million people attended. Security forces often surround the area to keep it safe, but what happened today was apparently a terrible and terrifying accident, killing people who were simply here to praise God. Keir Simmons, NBC News, London.
There were reports that the crane was struck by lightning before it fell, and to which my thought was, if you build one of the world's largest lightning rods next to a place that is a very false religion, you're kind of asking for it. Now look, I'm grieved that these people went to eternity worshiping a false religion, okay? I'm not making light of that. I really am not. That's troubling. But the whole world appears to be coming up on a time just such as that, where the storm of God's judgment will overtake them quickly and suddenly, while they're saying peace and safety. We're building a utopia. The world is set up for that. This is I believe it's a warning sign. I really do. Now, can I defend it? I can't prove it from Scripture, okay? I'm just saying instinctively, it tells me that something is going on. Other things going on in the Middle East. This is a picture of people in Sana'a, Yemen. Front page of the New York Times just this morning. Airstrikes take toll on civilians in Yemen war. Bombs solidify anger at Saudis and allies. So Yemen, which I think is mentioned in Bible prophecy under the rubric of Sheba Dedan in that area, is in civil war. And the people that seem to have the upper hand in the civil war now want to go to war with Saudi Arabia next door. And Saudi Arabia is in trouble. Their economy, their government budget is set up for oil to be selling at $45 a barrel. Oil's on its way to $20 a barrel or less. Maybe I've read some reports, people prognosticating and saying it will get down to $8 a barrel. So Saudi Arabia is borrowing money to sustain its government. The rich Saudi Arabians are borrowing money. What does that tell you about the world's economy? Now, what is Saudi Arabia's response to that? They will pump more oil because they want the revenue. And they have the oil to pump. So that causes the price to drop even further. They pump more. But it causes other oil production around the world to cease, like in the Bakken fields up in North Dakota, because it just becomes, it's much more expensive to take it out of the ground than you can get for selling it. What's that do? It depresses the price of oil even further, and we're into the throes of a depression. Commodity prices are falling all over. There were riots in France, or demonstrations in France this week, and the French don't riot. They surrender, but they don't riot. And it was farmers protesting because the price, they don't get the price for their crops that they need to pay for it's not sustainable, I guess is the way to say it. But this is coming to America too. Prices are going to drop. Land values are going to drop. It's all part of this economic throw that we're in. China's economy continues to collapse. And all of these things converge to allow, if you were writing a scenario, how could someone come about the kind of why would the world turn to this one person who the Bible describes as such an evil person? Well, write the scenario out as to what happened. How about collapsing economy? How about World War? How about massive immigration, refugees? I mean, what would you put together to make that happen? This is what you would do, exactly what's happening in the world right now. That's my point. And we see this exodus, and I'll talk a little bit about this morning, this exodus from the Middle East to Europe. These massive wave of immigration, mainly from Syria, at least they believe 4 million on their way, 1 million coming into Germany this year. Now they're being joined by Iraqis, which causes and Europe is in a quandary what to do about it. Finland says, no way. It'll destroy our society. It's significant to note that no one in the Middle East is taking them in. My judgment is that Europe is being invaded right now as we watch. There's no doubt. In the past, when armies invaded Europe, I'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, is there places in the Middle East that could take them in? Well, for example, in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, there is a tent city, currently unoccupied, by the way. It will be full up in a couple of weeks when the Hajj takes place, the pilgrimage. That tent city will accommodate, it's all air-conditioned tents, plumbing. It will accommodate 3 million people. Unoccupied. And Arabs are flooding into Europe, and the president doesn't want to bring 10,000 here, he wants to bring 40,000 here. They're migrating, as we talked about last week, mainly over land to through Turkey. They then get on boats and cross the Aegean Sea to Athens or other islands in Greece. They're then transported up through Greece to Macedonia, then through Serbia and the Balkans, then into Hungary, on their way to Austria and Germany and all that. The images of this are stunning. In the lower left-hand corner, you see a video of protests going on outside the train station in central Budapest. They're throwing feces. They're all Arab. Throwing feces, chanting Allah Akbar, and F you. I cut out the audio on this. In the upper right-hand corner, you see them handing out things. Actually, I'm going to back the one up in the right-hand corner because the upper right-hand corner. If you remember, let's see. I showed this picture last week. Now, look, what started this off? I mean, did Europe have a problem when they saw people dead from chemical attacks with their saliva foaming at the mouth, their corpses? But what set them off? A little baby boy that washed up on the beach in Turkey. I think it was Turkey. Now, they immediately were able to find, in all this chaos, they found the parents, the father, and took the body back there for a funeral that was all publicized. There's good evidence that this might have been staged. The kid was dead, but that his body washing up on the beach might have been staged. And I showed you the pictures on the front page of all the major newspapers of this little boy laying dead on the beach. And that has engendered this sympathetic reaction from the Europeans. Oh my goodness, we have to help these people. And so my point is this, is I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I know people do things to deceive people. And so whether it was staged or whether it was real, the fact of the matter is that this has triggered this sympathetic reaction from Europeans. And so the Europeans now are not only, well, for example, here's another picture. This is the picture that was on all the newspapers. The man and the woman being apparently assaulted by the police while laying on the train tracks. Here's the real video of what happened. Watch what happens. He grabs her and throws her down. Then he grabs her, and see what he's doing? Now that looks to be staged. I think I could make the case for that in any courtroom. But that's what's doing to engender sympathy. Here are other pictures of people walking on train tracks, garbage dumps, getting on buses, getting on trains. And the difference in all of this is, in prior invasions, it was customary for the invading army to provide their own transportation. In this one, Europe is providing the transportation for the invading army. It's a very unusual, it's a very effective tactic of war. I don't even think that, what's that guy, Shinzu, the Chinese guy who wrote the book on war a long time ago? Angela Merkel, who grew up in communist East Germany, by the way, is sort of being portrayed as like a Madonna figure now because she's posing for selfies with the refugees and all of this. In the Wall Street Journal yesterday, Walter Russell Mead had an interesting long article, I'll read part of it, called A Crisis of Two Civilizations in the review section. The migration crisis enveloping Europe. And I want you to look at that. We know what Bible prophecy says about some things. Listen to what he says. The migration crisis enveloping Europe and much of the Middle East today is one of the worst humanitarian disasters since the 1940s. In fact, if you go back and look at the chart I showed earlier, it's been bad ever since World War II. And it's really increasing right now. Millions of desperate people are on the march. Sunni refugees driven out by the barbarity of the Assad regime in Syria. Christians and Yazidis fleeing the pornographic violence of the Islamic State, along with Sunnis too, by the way. Millions more of all faiths and no faith fleeing poverty and oppression without end. Parents are, you think I'm dark? Parents are entrusting their lives and the lives of their young children to rickety boats and unscrupulous criminal syndicates along the Mediterranean coast. Professionals and business people are giving up their livelihoods and investments. Farmers are abandoning their land, and from North Africa to Syria, the sick and the old are on the road carrying a few treasured belongings on a new trail of tears. And they're even leaving Islamic countries in Africa, Sudan, Nigeria, the areas of Nigeria that are under the control of Boko Haram. They're leaving even there to go to someplace new. They're paying $5,000 a person. So do the math on that, how much it would cost to $5,000 a person to get 1 million people to Germany this year. It's a pretty stunning number. Somebody's funding this. These people come from abject poverty. I believe somebody's funding this. It is the first migration crisis of the 21st century, but it is unlikely to be the last. The rise of identity politics across the Middle East and much of sub-Saharan Africa is setting off waves of violence like those that tore apart the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire in the 19th and 20th centuries, just 100 years ago. The hatreds and rivalries driving endangered communities to exile and destruction have a long history. They probably have a long future as well. What we are witnessing today is a crisis of two civilizations. The Middle East and Europe are both facing deep cultural and political problems that they cannot solve. The intersection of their failures and shortcomings has made this crisis much more destructive and dangerous than it needed to be, and carries with it the risk of more instability and more war in a widening spiral. The crisis of the Middle East has to do much more. Whoops, I read that one, didn't I? 100 years after the fall of the Ottoman Empire and 50 years after the French left Algeria, the Middle East has failed to build economies that allow ordinary people to live with dignity, has failed to build modern political institutions, and has failed to carve out the place of honor and respect in world affairs that its people seek. But don't worry. The UN has a plan for sustainable development. We need it now more than ever, will say the Pope. We need to come together as one and build a great humanity. I could almost write a speech. And if the Pope is who we suggested earlier, he's just greasing the skids for someone to follow along. So I'm not saying that he is. I'm just saying is the descriptions fit. At some point, we may say, you know what, that's who that is. But Jesus talked about this in Matthew chapter 24. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation, ethnic group shall rise against ethnic group, and kingdom against kingdom. Luke chapter 17, he says the same thing. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And so what is Walter Russell Mead saying in his article? This is all over the place. And you know what? It's what I see for the future going forward. Today we are watching the failure of Islamism. From the Muslim Brotherhood to the Islamic State, Islamist movements have had no more success in curing the ills of Arab civilization than any other of the other secular movements of the past. Worse, the brutal fanaticism and nihilistic violence of groups like Islamic State undercuts respect for more moderate versions of Islamic spirituality and thought. Now, you remember that Bill Warner, we played his, I'm going to play his clip about the battles of Islam and the Crusades, because there's always people say they're equivalent. And remember this clip that we played, probably a year and a half ago.
And here it starts. Islam burst out of the Arabian.
And what he's going to do is he's going to put little white spots for each new battle, and then they'll become red spots. And you'll see the history of Islam from its founding to about 1920.
Peninsula, and immediately starts attacking the Middle East. And notice that it doesn't take long until they're crossing the Mediterranean and attacking southern France and Spain. Notice something here. Most people think of Islam, they think of Arabs, they think of desert, and yet here we see that Islam is projecting power throughout the Mediterranean. Notice how the little islands of the Mediterranean are getting hammered. The navy of Islam would attack coastal towns, kill, rob, rape, and then take slaves. So this whole battle map, as it unfolds, you're seeing slaves being taken. Over 1 million slaves were taken out of Europe into the Islamic world. That's something you don't think about much, but it's absolutely true. There were over 200 battles fought in Spain alone. And we also see, however, on the east coast in Turkey, that Islam is trying to break into Europe. Now, what's going to happen is in Spain, this ongoing fight that lasted for 400 years, the Christians are going to push back the Muslims. But now then what has happened over in the east is that Constantinople has fallen, and now then Eastern Europe is getting hammered. The jihad now comes to Eastern Europe. It's pushed out now of Spain.
And what you'll see is in this map, as they move up into Europe, there's people have talked about the gates of Vienna. They were knocking on the gates of Vienna for hundreds of years. Now, they're not knocking on the gates. They've been handed the keys, or the gate has been opened.
Northern Africa is now completely Islamic. The Middle East is completely Islamic. This is all jihad, relentless jihad. And why is it so relentless? Well, Muhammad was relentless in his jihad. And these people are good students of Islam, and so it's against the kafir on.
By the way, this does not deal with the jihad that was waged in India, where by most reasonable estimates, 200 million people died in the jihad in India. And to this day, it's not forgotten.
On and on. It was traditional that when the Sultan came to power, the brand new Sultan, he would immediately try to launch new wars because he was going to be noted in his Islamic history as to how well he fought against the kafir. So that's what the jihad looked like over that time period, 548 battles. But remember, when you bring up jihad, people want to bring up the Crusades. So I also prepared a dynamic battle map of all the offensive raids of the Crusaders. Let's watch it and make a comparison. And so it begins. The Crusades enter into Turkey and the Middle East. Battles go on, but aren't there far fewer than you thought there might be? And here we go. The last battles are fought, and that is the end of the Crusades. So now then we can talk about some facts. Yes, there were Crusades, but notice they ended centuries ago, and jihad is being practiced today. Jihad has been with us for 1,400 years. There is no comparison between jihad and the crusade.
One method of jihad, I can't remember, it begins with a K, and I can't remember how you say it. My Arabic is really poor. My English is not that great either, but it means jihad by, guess what? Immigration. You watch those videos, I would estimate upwards of 2/3 or 3/4 of the people that you see going through the train stations, you saw some in the video that I played, are fit young males. Do you think it is possible that some of them are plants by ISIS? How do you know where they're coming from? Well, you know where they're coming from, but how do you know who they are? This, I believe, is jihad that's being waged on Europe, and it will upset Europe. This was from 6 years ago, this video on Muslim demographics. Essentially starts off with the world is changing. This is 6 years ago. The global culture our children inherit will be vastly different than what it is today. You're about to witness a report on the world's changing demographics.
According to research, in order for a culture to maintain itself for more than 25 years, there must be a fertility rate of 2.11 children per family. With anything less, the culture will decline. Historically, no culture has ever reversed a 1.9 fertility rate. A rate of 1.3, impossible to reverse, because it would take 80 to 100 years to correct itself, and there is no economic model that can sustain a culture during that time. In other words, if two sets of parents each have one child, there are half as many children as parents. If those children have one child, then there are 1/4 as many grandchildren as grandparents. If only 1 million babies are born in 2006, it's hard to have 2 million adults enter the workforce in 2026. As the population shrinks, so does the culture. As of 2007, the fertility rate in France was 1.8, England 1.6, Greece 1.3, Germany 1.3, Italy 1.2, Spain 1.1. Across the entire European Union of 31 countries, the fertility is a mere 1.38. Historical research tells us these numbers are impossible to reverse. In a matter of years, Europe as we know it will cease to exist. Yet the population of Europe is not declining. Why? Immigration. Islamic immigration. Of all population growth in Europe since 1990, 90% has been Islamic immigration. France, 1.8 children per family. Muslims, 8.1. In southern France, traditionally one of the most populated church regions in the world, there are now more mosques than churches. 30% of children ages 20 and younger are Islamic. In the larger cities such as Nice, Marseille, and Paris, that number has grown to 45%. By 2027, 1 in 5 Frenchmen will be Muslim. In just 39 years, France will be an Islamic republic. In the last 30 years, the Muslim population of Great Britain rose from 82,000 to 2.5 million, a 30-fold increase. There are over 1,000 mosques, many of them former churches. In Russia, there are over 23 million Muslims. That's 1 out of 5 Russians. 40% of the entire Russian army will be Islamic in just a few short years. Currently in Belgium, 25% of the population and 50% of all newborns are Muslim. The government of Belgium has stated 1/3 of all European children will be born to Muslim families by 2025, just 17 years away. The German government, the first to talk about this publicly, recently released a statement saying, "The fall in the German population can no longer be stopped. Its downward spiral is no longer reversible. It will be a Muslim state by the year 2050. Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya said, "There are signs that Allah will grant victory to Islam in Europe without swords, without guns, without conquest. We don't need terrorists. We don't need homicide bombers. The 50+ million Muslims in Europe will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades." There are currently 52 million Muslims in Europe. The German government said that number is expected to double in the next 20 years to 104 million.
Now, I don't have current statistics on the people. I do know this is the CIA report on birth rates as of 2014, and you can see Germany up there at 1.43, might have gone up a little bit, but that would include the Muslim influx. And it's interesting, Muslim birth rates are falling in the Middle East pretty dramatically. In fact, probably in Israel, Palestine, Caroline Glick makes this point very well in her book, The One-State Solution, that Muslim demographics are falling, and everybody says, oh, the Palestinians are going to outpopulate the Israelis, and it's just not borne out by the facts. But in Europe, in Western Europe, when they immigrate, they way outproduce everybody else. You can go down there. I think the birth rate in Singapore is 0.8, the fertility rate. So this is a massive thing that's going on all over the world. We are a little bit above 2.1 in the United States because we have immigration. And I just believe that we're seeing, in the context of everything else going on in the world, this massive cultural, geopolitical shift is happening when Israel's back in the land. Brett Stevens, one of the best foreign policy writers, wrote this the other day in the Wall Street Journal: "Farewell to the era of no fences." This was supposed to be the era of no fences, no walls between blocks, no borders between countries, no barriers to trade, visa-free tourism, the single market, a global internet, frictionless transactions, and seamless exchanges. In short, a flat world. Whatever happened to that? In the early 1990s, Israel's then Foreign Minister Shimon Peres published a book called The New Middle East, in which he predicted what soon would be in store for his new neighborhood. Regional common markets reflect the new zeitgeist, he gushed. It was only a matter of time before it would become true in his part of the world too. Contrast this promised utopia with the mind-boggling scenes of tens of thousands of Middle East migrants marching up the roads and railways of Europe, headed for their German promised land. The images seem like a 21st century of the Vulcan Wandergang. You know, read whatever he says. The migration of nations in the late Roman and early medieval periods, desperate people needing a place to go, sweeping a broad landscape like an unchanneled flood. How did this happen? We mistook a holiday from history for the end of it. We built a fenceless world on the wrong set of assumptions about the future. We wanted a new liberal order, one with a lot of liberalism and not a lot of order. We wanted to be a generous civilization without doing the things required to be a prosperous one. This is a very, very wise man. In 2003, the political theorist Robert Kagan wrote a thoughtful book of Paradise and Power, in which he took stock of the philosophical divide between Americans and Europeans. Americans, he wrote, inhabited the world of Thomas Hobbes, in which true security and the defense and promotion of a liberal order might still depend on the possession and use of military might. Europeans, by contrast, lived in the world of Immanuel Kant, which was perpetual peace, was guaranteed by a set of cultural conventions, consensually agreed rules, and a belief in the virtues of social solidarity overseen by a redistributive state. These differences didn't matter much as long as they were confined to panel discussions at Davos. Then came the presidency of Barack Obama, which has adopted the Kantian view. For 7 years, the US and Europe have largely been on the same side. The European side of most of the big issues, especially in the Middle East, getting out of Iraq, drawing down in Afghanistan, lightly intervening in Libya, staying out of Syria, making up with Iran. Result is our metastasizing global disorder. It's only going to get worse. The graciousness that Germans have shown to the first wave of refugees is a tribute to the country's sense of humanity and history. But just as the warm welcome is destined to create an irresistible magnet for future migrants, it is also bound to lead to backlash among Germans. If Germany had robust economic and demographic growth, it could absorb and assimilate the influx. It doesn't, so it can't. Growth has averaged 0.31% a year since 1991. The country has the world's lowest birth rate. Tolerant modern Germany now looks with justified disdain toward the petty nationalism, burden shifting, and fence building of the populist Hungarian government of Viktor Orban. And that premier has come out and said, hey, he says we're a Christian country, this will destroy us. And I think he recognizes the facts. But it would be foolish to think of Hungary as a typical throwback rather than as a harbinger. There's no such thing as a lesson from the past that people won't ignore for the sake of the convenience of the present. Is there a way out? Suddenly there's talk in Europe about using military power to establish safe zones in Syria to contain the exodus of refugees. If U.S. administrations decide on adopting Kant, Europe, even Germany, may have no choice but to reacquaint itself with Hobbes by rebuilding its military and using hard power against unraveling neighbors. Is there a way out? Suddenly there's talk, and Europeans won't easily embrace that option. The alternative is to hasten the return to the era of fences. Openness is a virtue purchased through strength, and Hungary's actually been building a fence to stop it. And somebody did this editorial cartoon, the Trojan horse. This is a momentous thing, and Europe may, at this point, Europe may try, but will they be able to stop it? You know, I mean, their population is aging, like ours. They don't have a military. I mean, if you look at the statistics, I think the United States has 23 aircraft carriers. Russia, by the way, has how many aircraft carriers do you think? 20, right? They have 1. And in the battle group for the 1 Russian aircraft carrier, and I think this is accurate, I'm sure someone in this room will correct me if I'm wrong, their battle group, you know, we have destroyers and all these other things, and fuel and provision ships that go with our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. The Russians have tugboats that accompany theirs because the aircraft carrier keeps breaking down. But they did send their largest nuclear sub steaming towards the Mediterranean this week. It has 200 nuclear warheads on it. A very powerful option that they have. So I'm only pointing out, I think what is obvious to you is that the world is changing rapidly and that change is accelerating. Mahmoud Abbas is going to go to the UN to give a speech. I read somewhere where he said it's going to rock the world. The UN has said that they're going to raise the Palestinian flag, even though they're not a member state yet. Trust me, I believe there will be a resolution to introduce them as a state. I will say this, in the Oslo Accords, he is threatening to blow up. Now, the Oslo Accords were entered into on the White House lawn, Yitzhak Rabin on the left, Hillary's husband in the middle, and Yasser Arafat on the right. Now, this is not significant, but I happened to be in Washington, D.C. that day. In fact, the next day, I went down to the Congress. I got done with my deposition. And so I went down and said, I'm going to go see my friend. My friend was a Jewish congressman in his first term. He was really probably one of my best friends in high school. Very liberal, very left, but my friend. Pam and I have been over to have dinner at his house with he and his wife and family. And I love the guy. And he was there that day. There were 3,000 people on the White House lawn. That I think is a pretty significant number biblically in terms of witnesses. And I think it was 3,000. There are some that suggest that it is the Oslo Accords, which might be a covenant that a man will confirm. I think there's good reasoning behind that. In the paper this morning, Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian UN ambassador, hailed the historic vote, calling it another step towards fulfillment of the promise of independence made to the Palestinian people nearly 7 decades ago. He said last week that the Palestinians would like President Mahmoud Abbas to raise their flag after he addresses the General Assembly's annual gatherings of world leaders September 30th. Oh, there's the date. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is expected to announce an end to the Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinians. A senior Palestinian official told the Palestinian news agency Monday. The move comes as the Palestinian leadership has grown increasingly frustrated by a years-long impasse with Israel. This decision to nullify the agreement was reportedly drafted by a preparatory committee in advance of an upcoming Palestinian National Council meeting. The decision is likely to be announced before a UN General Assembly meeting slated for later in September. Various factions of the PLO, the most significant Palestinian international representative body, have reportedly already agreed to the idea. The Oslo Accords were considered a landmark agreement when reached in 1993. They marked the first time Israeli and PLO officials formally recognized each other and stipulated the creation of a temporary Palestinian administrative authority as an Israeli withdrawal from the West Bank by 1998 gradually took place. What's the Bible say about dividing up my land? So let me just suggest this. I'm not date setting, and I'm not saying this is met in stone, but I want to impress on you what I think is the potential urgency of the situation. We know that this prophetic 70th week of Daniel will begin by the confirmation of a covenant. I believe that's an existing covenant. It will be made stronger. Some say that it is something that is essentially, you can look at some of the verses about it, that it's shoved down the throats of the Israelis. That is set up. I'm telling you that it is possible that we could be days to weeks to a month away from a covenant being confirmed. I'm not saying that it will be. I don't know if this is the right time. I'm just saying that everything is in place for that to occur. That will have a significant impact on our lives and the lives of the world. I think it'll be everybody will be great. Peace and safety, this is fantastic. We finally got the major problem that's breaking apart humanity solved. It's so wonderful. And the people that know better that are here will be persecuted and laughed at because we're saying, wait a minute, we or whoever it is, are saying, wait a minute, you guys need to understand there is something even worse coming, and it's going to come pretty soon. You may have 3.5 years, but you need to be prepared for the destroyer. Now, again, I don't want anybody to go out of here and say, Heller's date setting. I'm not. I'm just telling you that the conditions are in place. I think it should be obvious to all of you that understand Bible prophecy. On top of that, we have these interesting announcements that Russian cargo planes, even the BBC, puts hearing aid in scare quotes in their headline. Because it's obvious what they're doing. Cargo planes, troops on the ground, aircraft, their most advanced anti-aircraft missile systems, all in place in Syria to prop up what's left of the Assad regime. There are large numbers of pipelines, even some oil reserves that traverse Syria. It's little talked about. There are other things, chemical weapons buried in bunkers around Damascus. My understanding from a confidential source is that Israel is extremely nervous about these developments. The Israeli government, IDF, and IAF are watching the situation very closely. Now, I don't think there's much left of Damascus from what I've seen in pictures. The burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Now, to get it to the ultimate thing right now, it appears it could happen in an evening, which I think is prophetic as well. The cities thereof are forsaken, they shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. I think the conditions are ripe for this to happen on the near horizon as well. But I thought that for a few years, and it could be a while. But I'm just saying it's sort of like, I called this a roller coaster. You know how you go down the big hill at first, and then you kind of coast along, and then whoop, another hill, you know, and sometimes they get more intense. And I think that's what happens here, is that we're in that, we've gone over the hill now, I think, in the world, and we're on the downhill. And then here is Ramirez's great cartoon in the Investors Business Daily the other day, the Iran deal in perspective. On the left, you see the burning World Trade Center on 9/11, and you see the Iranian mushroom cloud over New York. Some suggesting that, is this the covenant of death that Isaiah chapter 28, verse 15 talks about? I don't know. That might be what Israel's going to do. I'm just saying it's something that I think bears consideration. And then finally, this, and I'll close with this. Iran's supreme leader. We have peace now. Peace for our time. John Kerry says. This is a great deal. We're going to shove it through Congress. And guess what? Those Republicans are going to go along with it. They're going to put in a law. This is a lot for us to get this in. But it'll be great. Iran will be growing flowers at their nuclear facilities. They'll set up resorts in the buildings that they used to use. Somebody needs to get the memo to Khomeini, who said this week, Israel will no longer exist in 25 years. I don't put much stock in prophets from that religion, but his 25-year time frame may be correct with a country that begins with I, but it's not Israel. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saying, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, what's it say? I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling to all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And this morning, as Jews prepared to go up to the Temple Mount to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, there are conflicts going on in the Temple Mount. That's sort of the epicenter of all this stuff that's going on in the world. So that's pretty heavy stuff for today. Okay, so I get it. I read, believe me, if you knew what didn't make the cut, there's a lot left on the cutting room floor. And you need to be aware of what's going on. You need to be in the Word, studying these things, being good Bereans. Don't take my word for it. Go check it out. And I'm not absolutely declaring these things. I'm just telling you that from someone who studied this for a long time and who communicates regularly with people who've studied it decades longer than I have, every single one says, church needs to wake up. You need to wake up. You need to get right with God. And you need to share the gospel with people. Because what I said earlier, that crane falling in the mosque in Mecca, the whole world is going to come down like that. And we need to rescue as many people as we can. Okay? So let's pray. Father, give us strength, purify us, make us ready for service to you and to your glory. Bless us as we go this week. In Jesus' name, amen.